Welcome back, everybody. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Always ready to explore something new.
Well, today we're going way back in time. Going to be looking at the origins of hypnotism.
Hypnotism. Interesting.
Yeah, we've got this awesome book from 1903. It's called, get this, Complete Hypnotism, Mesmerism, Mind Reading, and Spiritualism.
Wow, that's a mouthful. Who wrote that?
A guy named A. Alpheus.
Yeah.
And, when you think about hypnotism, you might think, like, modern stuff, right?
Yeah, like swinging pocket watches and all that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this book suggests hypnotism has been around for centuries. Like, we're talking ancient mysteries, rituals of Isis, Indian fakirs, that kind of stuff.
Wow, I never thought about hypnotism like that. It's always seemed like a pretty modern thing to me.
Me too. That's why I'm so excited about this deep dive. I've always been curious about these practices, where they come from.
Yeah, uncovering those hidden roots, it's always fascinating.
So what about you? Did you ever picture hypnotism as having such a long history?
Honestly, not really. It's not the image that comes to mind. But hey, that's why we do these deep dives, right? To challenge our perceptions.
Totally. So let's get into it. This book starts us off in the 1770s, the era of Franz Mesmer.
Ah, Mesmer! That name rings a bell.
Was he the one who popularized that whole animal magnetism thing?
It's him. The OG, right. He was a doctor in Vienna, I think. And he was all about this universal force he called animal magnetism. Basically, he believed there was this invisible fluid flowing through all living things. And get this, he thought he could harness it for healing. Invisible fluid, huh? It sounds a bit out there.
I know, right? But think about it. Back in the 18th century, they were in the middle of the Enlightenment. People were super curious about the natural world.
True, they were trying to figure out how everything worked. So a mysterious, invisible force, I guess it could have made sense to them.
It's like today, right? People are fascinated by quantum physics, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, looking for those big explanations that tie everything together. But Mesmer, he didn't just talk the talk, right?
Oh, no, not at all. He was known for his interesting treatments.
Interesting, yeah.
Well, he created this thing called a baquet, or a tub. It was this elaborate setup filled with water, iron filings, glass bottles arranged in a specific pattern. It was quite a spectacle.
Wow, that's quite the visual. What did people do at this tub?
Well, patients would gather around this tub, holding onto iron rods connected to it. And Mesmer, he would move around the room like he was conducting an orchestra. He'd use his hands, even a wand, supposedly directing that animal magnetism.
I can only imagine what that must have been like to witness. Talk about a showman.
Right. And it totally caught the public imagination. People were fascinated. He even published this pamphlet, laid out his whole theory in 27 propositions about animal magnetism.
What did he say in those propositions?
It got pretty wild. He claimed that this universal fluid, it flowed between planets, humans, even inanimate objects.
Wow, that's a bold claim.
Yeah, he believed it could be like manipulated, transferred, even reflected by mirrors. It's a crazy mix of science and, well, something a little more mystical.
A bit of both, for sure. But like anything that sounds too good to be true, I'm guessing there were some skeptics.
Oh, absolutely. The medical establishment, they were not buying it.
I can imagine. Invisible fluids and all that. Where was the proof?
Exactly. They launched investigations, tried to debunk his methods. Big names got involved, even Benjamin Franklin. It was a whole scientific showdown.
Wow, Benjamin Franklin. That's quite the historical connection. So what were the main arguments against Mesmer's ideas?
Well, a lot of them centered on the power of imagination. Like maybe the effects Mesmer was seeing were just the placebo effect,
Yeah.
the power of belief.
It makes sense. People can be incredibly suggestible, especially when they're looking for a cure.
Right. And it makes you think even back then they were already wrestling with these ideas. The mind-body connection, the power of suggestion, it's still relevant today.
Definitely. It makes you wonder how much of what we experience is influenced by our own beliefs and expectations.
Exactly. But, even though Mesmer's theories ultimately fell out of favor, all that controversy actually paved the way for a more scientific approach to hypnotism.
Oh, so?
Well, it led to guys like James Braid, a Scottish surgeon who actually coined the term hypnotism. He was less about invisible fluids and more about tangible physical methods.
So a different approach altogether.
Yeah, he was all about fixed gaze. He believed if you stared at an object long enough, it could induce a trance. He even called it neurohypnotism at first.
So instead of relying on this mysterious force, he was focusing on observable phenomena.
Exactly. Like the way your eyes get tired after focusing on something for a long time. He thought that could lead to a kind of nervous sleep or a trance.
Interesting. And it sounds a lot more scientific than Mesmer's approach.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And one of his most famous experiments involved, get this, staring at bottles.
Bottles, really?
Yep, just regular bottles.
Yeah.
He had people stare at them for hours, trying to induce this sleep-like state. It's amazing to think something so simple could actually work.
I guess it shows that sometimes the simplest things can have profound effects. But Braid's ambitions went beyond just making people sleepy.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
He had some pretty big ideas about how hypnotism could be used to address social problems. He even thought it could cure criminal tendencies.
Whoa, hold on. Cure criminality with hypnotism. That sounds a little far-fetched.
I know, right? And obviously, it raises some serious ethical questions. But it's fascinating to see how even back then, they were already grappling with these issues.
The power of the mind to influence behavior, it's a topic that's both fascinating and a little bit scary.
Oh, definitely. But it makes you think, how much of who we are, how we act, is shaped by things we're not even aware of.
It's a good question. So we've got Mesmer with his magnetic tubs and Braid with his bottle experiments. It seems like those early pioneers were really trying to figure out how hypnotism worked.
Totally. But the next question is, how did they actually put it into practice? What were the techniques they used back then to induce these trance-like states?
Okay, now that's what I'm really curious about. What did a hypnotist's toolkit look like back then?
Well, this book actually outlines several different methods. Some sound familiar, others... Well, let's just say they were a product of their time.
Okay, I'm hooked. Let's open up that toolkit and see what's inside.
So we're cracking open that hypnotist toolkit from the past. What kind of techniques are we talking about here?
Well, one method described in this book is called the mental method. It's all about suggestion.
Suggestion.
Yeah, the hypnotist uses their voice, calm, soothing, telling the subject to relax, eyelids getting heavy, drifting off to sleep. It's like guided relaxation.
Oh, I see. Kind of like those meditation apps you can get now.
Exactly. It's tapping into that power of suggestion, how our minds can be influenced by external cues. But they also use techniques that were more visually based, like that bottle experiment from Braid.
Oh, yeah, the bottles.
Yeah.
I can't imagine staring at those for hours. But it worked, right?
Well, this next technique builds on that idea. It's called the bright object technique.
Bright object.
Yeah, basically you fix your gaze on something shiny. Could be a coin, a mirror. They even use spinning discs. There's this one hypnotist who used a bright light.
I think I've heard of that, like hypnotists using pendulums or those swirling patterns.
Exactly. The idea is to create this hypnotic fatigue through visual focus, almost like overloading the senses to shift consciousness.
It's like getting lost in the flames of a campfire. Or watching ocean waves, those repetitive, mesmerizing things.
Exactly. Our minds are naturally drawn to that kind of stuff. And speaking of getting drawn in, there's another technique called passes.
Passes. Like a football.
No, not quite. It's more like, think back to Mesmer and his hand movement.
Oh, right. Directing that animal magnetism.
Well, we know that's not a real thing now, but think about it. Someone waving their hands in front of you while you're trying to relax, it could still have an effect.
Yeah, I guess it could be kind of mesmerizing.
It's like those videos of people making sand mandalas. You get so absorbed in the flow.
Yeah, I totally get that. Okay, so we've got suggestion, bright objects, and passes. What else is in this hypnotic toolkit?
Well, there's one more that's really interesting. It's called fascination.
Fascination. Okay, now that one sounds intriguing.
This one's all about mimicking. The hypnotist would do something like raise their arm and the subject would automatically copy them.
Like a mirror image.
Yeah, it's like creating a physical link, deepening that connection through movement. It shows how suggestible people can become in a trance.
It's like when you're watching a good dance performance. You start unconsciously moving along with them.
Precisely. But it's important to remember not everyone can be hypnotized. The book makes that clear. It depends on the individual, their willingness, their susceptibility.
So it's not like the hypnotist has this magical power over everyone.
Not at all. Modern hypnotism, it's about guiding someone into a relaxed, receptive state. It's a collaboration.
Like a dance, where both partners have to work together.
Exactly. It's not about domination. And that's why the book emphasizes having qualified practitioners, people who understand these techniques and the ethics involved.
Yeah, you wouldn't want just anyone messing around with people's minds.
Exactly. Hypnotism can be a powerful tool, especially for therapy, but it's not something to be taken lightly.
It's a reminder that with any powerful tool, you got to use it responsibly. So what are your thoughts on all these techniques, and they stand out to you. I'm fascinated by the variety. They're really exploring different pathways into consciousness. But what really strikes me is the emphasis on the subject's role, their willingness, their susceptibility.
Yeah, that's key. It's about creating a collaborative space, not forcing anything.
Exactly. It's a journey of exploration together. But I'm curious, was hypnotism always seen as this serious scientific endeavor back then? Or was there a bit of showmanship mixed in?
That's a great question. And you know what? This book actually addresses that. It talks about the theatrical side of hypnotism, particularly stage shows.
Stage shows, like a magic act.
Kind of. They had trained subjects performing impressive feats, but a lot of it was exaggerated, played up for entertainment. It was all about the spectacle.
Sounds like a good time. But I bet there was a lot of skepticism around those shows, too.
There was. The book actually warns readers to be skeptical. It points out that a lot of what you see on stage, it's more about showmanship than genuine hypnotic phenomena.
Right, separating the entertainment from the real deal. That's important.
It's like anything, you got to be careful not to get swept up in the hype.
Exactly. And the book also makes it clear that hypnotism can be misused, especially when you don't have consent and understanding.
So even back then, they were aware of the potential for exploitation. Like, with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Absolutely. And that message is even more relevant today. We know so much more about the power of suggestion, the subconscious mind. It's a reminder to be critical, to question what you see and hear, especially when it comes to those big claims and miracle cures.
We've come a long way from those magnetic tubs and stage shows, haven't we? We have. It's amazing to see how our understanding of the mind has evolved. From mysterious fluids to the power of suggestion, the subconscious mind, it's a fascinating journey.
And one of the most interesting things I've learned is that suggestion. It's not just limited to those formal hypnotic settings. It's everywhere.
It really is. Think about advertising, social trends, even the way news is presented. Our subconscious minds are always picking up on these subtle cues. It shapes our perceptions, influences our choices.
Just like we're all part of this giant experiment, navigating a world filled with subtle influences.
Exactly. And while we might not have a hypnotist dangling a pocket watch in front of us, we're still encountering these suggestive forces all the time.
This deep dive has really been eye-opening. From Mesmer to Braid, all those fascinating techniques, it's clear that the human mind is incredibly powerful.
It is, and I think the biggest takeaway for me is that the power of the mind, it's something to be respected, studied, and understood. Whether we're talking about formal hypnotism or the subtle suggestions we encounter every day, our minds are constantly being shaped and influenced. So keep exploring, keep learning, and always remember, the most fascinating journey is often the one within.
It's like they were saying, hey, don't believe everything you see on stage.
Right, exactly. Always a good reminder. Even today, I mean, think about it. Hypnotism, it can be misused, right?
Yeah, for sure. Especially if someone's not fully aware of what's happening or they don't want to participate.
Consent is key, absolutely. And understanding this book, it really emphasizes those ethical considerations.
That old saying, right? With great power comes great responsibility.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And today, I think that message is even more important. We've learned so much about the power of suggestion, how our subconscious minds work.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
It is, and it's a reminder, like, we got to be critical thinkers, question what we see, what we hear, especially when people are making those big claims, like miracle cures and stuff.
Always good advice. It's been an incredible journey, this deep dive, from Mesmer's magnetic tubs to those wild stage shows, and now all these insights into the mind. It's fascinating.
It really is. We've come a long way in understanding the power of the human mind. It's not about those mysterious fluids anymore. It's about suggestion, the subconscious, all these incredible forces that shape who we are.
And one of the things that's really stuck with me is that suggestion. It's not just about hypnotists and trances. It's all around us.
It really is. Everywhere you look. Advertising, social media, even the news. Our subconscious is constantly taking in these subtle cues.
It's like we're swimming in a sea of suggestion and we don't even realize it.
That's a great way to put it. And while we might not have a hypnotist swinging a pocket watch in our faces, those suggestive forces are still at play, shaping our perceptions, our choices, our lives.
This has been an amazing deep dive. Thanks for taking us on this journey.
My pleasure. It's always exciting to explore these topics. And, at the end of the day, the biggest takeaway for me is this. The power of the mind, it's incredible. Whether we're talking about formal hypnotism or those everyday suggestions, our minds are constantly being shaped and influenced. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and always remember the most fascinating journey is often the one within.
And there you have it, folks. Another deep dive complete. Be sure to tune in next time for more fascinating explorations into the past. Until then, stay curious.